So last 2 decades, the battery came from under the hood, under the staircase, in a secluded room to center stage. It's not just entrepreneurs, investment funds started talking about it, media started talking about it, politicians started talking about it.
One summer vacation turned into 35 years of long journey sticking to one organization.
So 72 hours from the time I left home on Sunday evening with absolutely no clue how everything will work, I was actually on a flight to US. But thankfully, Bumblebee doesn't know science or technology, so it doesn't get itself constrained by that part, and it keeps trying to fly, and we all know that it eventually flies. And what I see is that they have actually understood the value chain very well to be able to control what's happening. No. Write down what you control and write down what you don't control. If your strategy is able to move what you don't control into what you control, push them from this bucket to this bucket, you have a great strategy.
Welcome to the SP show. Today we are with Vijayanand Samudrala from Amara Raja. Thanks, Vijay, for doing this.
Thank you, Srinivas, for having me here. I really look forward to this conversation.
So just to introduce to our audience, who is Vijayanand actually?
Well, in a single sentence, I consider myself as a technocrat who thrives on the left brain, but is inspired by the right brain. That's a challenge for engineers, that they think too logically, but when they get to see a lot of innovation happening around them, that's a great source of innovation. But seriously, I think I've been an energy professional for a long period, and have been enamored by the art of possibilities in the energy space.
That's very good to hear, actually. So where did you grow up, and what shaped you to choose this kind of field? Is there any background to it?
I basically come from the town of Tirupati in Andhra Pradesh. That's what I say, that I belong to that place, that we call it the native place. My family has a very typical middle class background that's so very synonymous with India 50 years ago. I am lucky to have very educated parents. Both of them are in teaching profession. My father has been a Sanskrit professor for more than 4 decades, and my mother was a teacher in a school, the Telugu language teacher, for about 3 decades. So, I had 2 teachers at home to behave myself well. Tirupati is known more for its pilgrim visits, because it hosts one of the most popular religious institution, and to that extent, you always are influenced by the spiritual environment around us. But typical to most middle class families, education has been a very, very important element of the parental focus. I think even today, India is strengthened by the amount of focus on education. Perhaps the first rupee that a family has is spent on kids' education. That's how important it is. And that's typically has been seen over at least 2 generations of Indians over the last 40 to 50 years. So I grew up in Tirupati. I got educated myself in school as well as college till I graduated from the SVU College of Engineering, which is a local university college, in chemical engineering stream. And then after passing out my bachelor's there, I went to do my master's from the Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, again in chemical engineering stream. And typically those days, job opportunities were largely limited to either a government institution or a quasi-government institution like the public sector units. So anybody getting employed with the state electricity board or the state public works department or the state sports and building, electrical engineers, civil engineers, or at best PSUs like BHEL, NTPC, ONGC, which are the core manufacturing and the core oil and gas sector. I think you would have hit upon a jackpot. That's the mindset with which we were there. Very, very few people used to look at moving abroad for higher studies, and supported by the socioeconomic levers that are required to move abroad. So when I moved to IIT Mumbai, I think that's a bit of a transformation. It opened up my world. The learning experience is very different in an IIT campus. You are suddenly challenged by application of what you learn in the classroom, and you also have an opportunity to challenge others, even professors, if they have good ideas. So the opportunity spectrum widened when I went to IIT in Bombay for my master's. That's where I was selected on a campus interview by Hindustan Lever Limited at that point of time. It's now called Hindustan Unilever in India. It's part of the Unilever global group. So I joined Hindustan Lever Limited in the research center in Mumbai at that time. That 2.5 years that I was with that organization was very strong foundational experience for me to put to work what I learned in college. And it was very interesting experience at that point of time working on the personal products division of Unilever, where they make dental care products, skin care products, and hair care products. So a lot of scientific application of knowledge was important, and that's how my career began. But if the question is about how did you end up in the energy sector, that my first move from changing a job from the Hindustan Lever Limited to Amara Raja back in 1992 was more a kind of serendipitous in a way, because I was visiting my native place in Tirupati on a vacation, happened to be invited to Amara Raja factory by a family friend who used to work there. As I said, Tirupati is not known for industrial culture. It's more a pilgrim town. So I was also curious to visit a factory that has come up there. So I went to visit the factory, got a quick tour around the factory, and happened to meet the vice president of technology there as a visitor. And that's when he asked me, "What did you notice as a engineer on the shop floor?" I had to tell him that, look, I did a very quick tour, and I was thought to meet you because it looks like there is a time constraint for this discussion. So I didn't really spend a lot of time as a chemical engineer. He prompted me saying that we don't have many chemical engineers in our organization. Why don't you go back and spend some more time, see what you observe with your educational background. So I had an opportunity to go and spend more leisurely time on the shop floor. Went back to him, had a conversation, and it all ended up where he asked me, "Would you be interested to join us?" I had no idea about that when I went to visit the factory initially. But when he prompted me to consider joining the organization, I think I was more attracted to the idea of working in your native place. Uh, there's a big difference between Hindustan Lever Limited as an employer and Amara, which is a kind of a startup company at that point. So I said, I need time to think about it, but there is always this bug in your mind about going back to your native place to work. That's how the journey started. So when I joined Amara, I don't think I had any major expectations about how the career will go. And my decision to join was more triggered by the attraction of working in your native place. But as things evolved, I had a wonderful 3.5 decade of experience.
It's quite interesting to know that, one summer vacation turned into 35 years of long journey sticking to one organization, which is kind of very unusual nowadays, isn't it? Can you shed some light about the founder or someone who really influenced it to make that decision from the global company to a local startup?
Yeah. So as I said, my attraction to consider joining Amaraja was about an employment in your native place with your family and all of that. But as I got into the job and into the organizational context, I realized that the founder's vision is much larger in terms of bringing in significant transformation in many areas. Transformation has been a key word for us over the many decades. He has been, I would say, non-traditional. The choice of choosing to set up a startup company that is significantly oriented towards manufacturing capability in a region that doesn't have industrial work culture itself. But I think he had a very strong conviction about bringing globally relevant technology to Indian markets build a manufacturing ecosystem by utilizing the human resources that are otherwise available in the rural economy of India, provide them the training and provide them the skills to excel in what they do. Well, all of this would have taken an extra effort because we didn't have trained workforce in that area. We didn't have the trunk connectivity that is so very critical for manufacturing ecosystem to build up in terms of road connectivity, power connectivity, water facilities, many other things, including human talent. But if you are very focused on what you have set as a vision with a missionary approach, we were able to overcome that. And the journey of being part of that missionary approach is probably what kept us completely excited about it. I think we all believe that we are on a mission mode to change the world around us. As I said, transformation of the product technology that we were handling at that point of time, transformation of markets and the consumer preferences, transformation of people who work with us, transformation of communities that we were part of. A lot of this is probably has that excitement of participating in a missionary journey that's making a difference to everybody that we have come across. Uh, to give you the right context, the first wave of our manufacturing was around the wall-regulated lead-acid battery technology, which is very new to the country at that point of time, because India was making lead-acid batteries for traditional applications like telephone exchanges, industrial applications, including the railway transportation. But these were archaic technologies using tubular plates with excessive acid that is gassing a lot during its charging cycle, and hence these batteries need to be handled with care in secluded areas, earmarked for installing batteries, requiring very, very intense maintenance protocols. The wall-regulated lead-acid technology that we brought into the country suddenly appeared to be very, friendly to the user, solving a lot of maintenance-related challenges, which were some of the failure modes that you don't take care of the battery maintenance properly, it'll end up failing. So the VRLA technology provided that maintenance-free, user-friendly, compact footprint and the longer life forecast. And we truly believed every word of that when we were promoting this technology. But it wasn't easy because bulk of the procurement of batteries at that point of time were done by government agencies. It's either Department of Technology, Department of Telecom, Railways, which is a government organization, public sector units, which have a very tender-based competitive source. So it was not easy to go and participate in those businesses and win the business. It required technology evangelization, which means you go and educate people about the technology tools. Then you have proof of concepts demonstrated. There were cases where we have given few sets of batteries free of cost to make the customer's experience. Then work at the back end about specing the product, developing test protocols, approval criteria, and pass the filtration of vendor evaluation, filtration of product approval before you can actually participate in the business. I would consider that as a very, very exciting period of technology evangelization because we truly believed that we had something unique to offer the customer that's creating significant value. That I think is the startup phase of the association. So why I'm saying this is as a trigger for joining Amara Raja was to go back to the native place where I was coming from. Within 2 years of joining the company, I went back to Mumbai where I used to work for Hindustan Lever as a regional manager. So though the attraction of working in a local native place, was no longer relevant 2 years later, I think the mission mode that we were in kept the excitement and the adrenaline flowing through whatever we did.
So you mentioned a lot about the manufacturing during that time, right? You're talking about early 90s, right? 1990s.
Yeah, I
Right.
joined on November 92.
92, yeah. So if you want to put like one or two shifts you have seen in the Indian economy side, either on the manufacturing or entrepreneurship, what would you point out? What are the things changed over these 3 decades?
I think there are two factors to this. Number one is 91 is when India has taken up very significant and radical economic liberalization measures. At that
Yeah.
point of time, Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao and Finance Minister Manmohan Singh have come together to announce a set of liberalization initiatives. I think more mandated by the economic crisis we had at that point of time rather than a voluntary effort. But
Yeah.
that turned out to be a turning point in the Indian economic journey. Now it's more than 35 years since that has been announced by the government at that point of time. And it was followed up with a series of, reform waves that have happened in this. Prior to that, manufacturing industry was kind of constrained by what we used to call as license Raj. That means you got to go back to the government to take permission to make any product. You got to go back to the government to import any machinery that you want for manufacturing. You got to go back to the government to take permission for what capacity of manufacturing facility you are creating. So everything depended upon government license. Post 91, that got a bit liberalized. But by then, a lot of groundwork was done by the Amara Raja already to get the initial phase of manufacturing started. But this liberalization allowed us to track what's required by the market. That's one aspect that I would say. The second aspect is sectorally, while our blueprint for business strategy back in late 80s would have talked about certain market segments, what actually happened was that the telecom market exploded. We were supplying batteries for the central telecom exchanges for the landline network. And hence, you got to go to these towns and urban centers to go and replace existing batteries or whenever they expanded, put new battery installations. But way back in 95, the wireless mobile telephony services came, which means that your footprint of mobile towers or mobile
Course.
network was far more widespread than the central telecom exchanges. Central telecom exchanges had the luxury of having a large maintenance crew infrastructure to install the traditional tubular lead acid batteries. So there was no compulsion for them to look at a non-attendant maintenance fee fit and forget kind of product. But the mobile network evolution in the country demanded for a battery that is now maintenance free, doesn't require daily attention, can work on its own in a fit and forget mode. Of course, it required some supervision and monitoring, but not the kind of rigorous intense maintenance protocols that were otherwise required. So, as I would say, luck would have it, our product suddenly became very relevant for the mobile networks, and it was becoming relatively easier to push the VRLA technology into mobile networks. So our early blueprint for business would have probably assumed a business mix from UPS, business mix from industry, control and the instrumentation related power backup, and then probably telecom was part of it. But towards late 90s, telecom became actually a prime engine of our business. So that's one transformation that I've seen. I talked about telecom as a sector, but second half of the 90s decade also see automotive revolution happening. Of course, we had Maruti Suzuki as one of the early automotive company that made a passenger vehicle affordable to Indian society. But up until Hyundai came to India, the variety of automotive vehicles available was constrained. With the Hyundai coming in and bringing in, very relevant vehicle platform to the Indian market, the automotive market started expanding, and that made us realize an adjacency opportunity to move from industrial batteries to automotive batteries. We have entered into a JV partnership with a global leader in automotive battery technology at the time, Justin Rose, and started building the product portfolio for automotive customers in India. And automotive market meant you sell the OEMs who are making these vehicles, which is B2B. Whereas you also have a significant replacement market, which means you have to have a branded product with a strong distribution channel to reach the market customers. I would say this is the second wave of change that happened in Amara Raja, triggered by the automotive revolution that was happening. Now, the third market segment that really exploded and gave us significant traction in our business growth is the IT, services scaling up. It meant
Mhm.
that a lot more computers were getting installed all over the place. Government institutions, corporates, healthcare industry, education institutions, and hence, considering that the grid power is relatively unreliable at that point of time, the UPS demand, the uninterrupted power supply demand for these IT infrastructure became important. And we had to introduce a range of battery products that will serve the UPS. And that became a third element of strong, vertical. So we were there at the right time when the telecom market exploded. We were there at the right time when the automotive market exploded. We were there at the right time when the IT infrastructure in the country exploded with the right products. I would consider
Would-
that probably as a significant enabler. If I look back and say, were we very conscious of those strategic decisions that we made? I think not so much, but I think an entrepreneurship, as somebody defined to me, is about jumping from a cliff and grow your wings as you fall, and then learn to fly. I think we were making certain decisions, but as the things evolved, we were also agile enough to make changes in our decisions to adapt to what the market is asking.
So I would say I think it's rather not a coincidence, but you as a company is well prepared for those changes to enable you to jump into the next opportunity and then expand the markets accordingly. Right.
Absolutely.
So
And Srinivas, this is where there is this very inspiring concept that we talk about, the Bumblebee mindset.
yeah. Mhm.
We consider, if you look at classical definition of a bumblebee from an aerodynamics perspective, most scientists say that bumblebee body doesn't allow itself to fly because aerodynamically it's incapable of flying. But thankfully, bumblebee doesn't know science or technology, so it doesn't get itself constrained by that part, and it keeps trying to fly. And we all know that it eventually flies. So I think the mindset is about not to get overwhelmed with the constraints and hurdles in achieving your aspiration or vision, and make honest effort with passion, and you will figure out a way to achieve. I think that's been a constant inspiration or a constant DNA of the Amaraja mindset.
So how this Johnson Controls joint venture actually happened? Is there any story behind it? I mean, what are the early days looks like? Why Johnson Control chosen like Amara Raja?
As you rightly said, as an organization matures, systems and processes become a little more institutionalized to follow a particular methodology to decision making and all of that because there are more people involved. But I'm talking way back in 96, 97, when Raja as a business entity is less than a decade old. Our battery business is probably about 5, 6 years old at that time. But we have already made significant progress in our industrial battery business, thanks to what I said about the telecom market explosion as well as the Indian railways. I thought to give you a bit of background to the promoters here. Our founder chairman, Dr. Ramchandra. He has been a technocrat who worked in US for about 17 years, moved back to India inspired by a mission to come back and set up a business with a lot of social entrepreneurship mindset. He really wanted to give back something to the communities from where he came from with a very, very humble background. But a co-founder for the group is Jay Galla, who is our founder chairman's son. While generation wise, you might consider him as the next generation, but from a entrepreneurship wise and the initial founding efforts, the Amaraja Group, Jay is kind of a co-founder. He came back from US after having lived most of his life in US, a 3-year-old kid up to probably 26-year-old young professional. He joined the company back in 91. And after 5, 6 years, I think it's a calling for him to say that what else do we need to grow the company? And with the limited management team that we had at the time, we explored opportunities of adjacencies. We knew that from a supply chain perspective, we had a decent amount of control on the lead, which is the primary material. And then we looked at what else we can do with the understanding we had on the supply chain, the understanding we had on the manufacturing side. And that's when we found, as I said, the automotive industry was just about getting, onto a faster growth trajectory. So it was decided, why don't we expand into automotive space, which means making batteries for automotive application. That's when both founder, chairman, and Jay went around to look at what's the right opportunity for partnership in this, because the fundamental philosophy has been look at the globally contemporary technologies that have a better future proofing, means they're not likely to become obsolete in near future, and we can continue to evolve them and bring them to Indian context and make it adaptable for Indian applications. That was the primary philosophy. So they went around, looked at few players, had conversations with multiple players. Around the same time, Ford, as an automotive major, was also looking at coming to India. And they have actually introduced a vehicle by name Escort, which had both a petrol and a diesel variant. And they were making it in India in collaboration with another Indian OE, Mahindra, and they were being made in limited quantity. And the automotive supply chain need to evolve homologation and the local component sourcing. So Ford has already worked on buying batteries or sourcing batteries for their Escort vehicle within local manufacturing. But we later realized that Ford was actually having conversation with their battery suppliers back in US, saying that who can support them of their expansion plans, because Ford was having a made for India vehicle platform on the design board at that point of time. So they were talking to their suppliers. There were two large battery suppliers back in US for Ford, one of them being Johnson Controls. So Johnson Controls has made a ad hoc arrangement to produce batteries that were qualified by Ford with some kind of a contractual understanding with another Indian entity in India, but that was a very limited quantity. But it so happened that the contractual arrangement they had with the Indian entity went through a mergers and acquisition, and hence it didn't exist the way it existed when Johnson Control tied up with them. So Johnson Controls were now for looking at other opportunities or other ways of making the batteries. Yeah? And Ford said that, look, this is not a short-term ad hoc arrangement. We really wanted a long-term play there, and means scale up specific investments to happen. All of that. So they were looking for a battery partner in India, and Amara Raja was on the lookout for a global partner. We have had talked to the reputed companies from US, from Europe, Japan. This is the time when Johnson Control Management and our founder chairman and Jay had a conversation in one of the industry conferences, and we invited Johnson Control Management to come to India. Srinivas, back in mid 90s, I'm talking about 96, 97. India is not a market that really attracted global players, particularly on the manufacturing area. There's not a market that has scale. That's not a market which is easy to do business. So if you talk to any of these strategy teams in large corporates, India would not have been a priority for them on many of the decision-making choices. But we were able to convince Johnson Controls that you have a reason to support Ford. We have a reason to get into automotive space. So we are not going to demand a huge bandwidth of your resources, either management resources or financial resources. Allow us to serve Ford in India with your support, and we will parallelly build a product portfolio that can cater to many other automotive OEMs. We are, hungry for a business, and we will put the resources required to build this business. What we need from you is kind of a hand holding. So to cut the long story short, I think it worked out well. But I also remember a very significant visit of Johnson Control Management team to come and see what are we really capable of. Yeah. And while we were making industrial products at the time, and we have penetrated into some new segments with our industrial products. I think what convinced them is the spirit of entrepreneurship, spirit of innovation, coupled with the discipline. I think that probably, kind of enabled the partnership to happen. And we invited Jazz Controls to take equity in the company, which is already a listed entity. Being a listed entity, they joined as a JV partner with 24%. Now, if I fast forward this to a 20-year relationship that we enjoyed between 1997 to 2018, when Jobs Controls, as a corporate entity, exited battery business globally by selling their battery business to Brookfield. And Brookfield, with their operating philosophy of having a majority control on operations, decided to exit India because the founder management in Amara Raja was firmly in saddle in terms of control. So Brookfield opted to exit. I'm saying the 20-year period was a huge win-win, the largest US Indo joint venture in the manufacturing sector, particularly in automotive space. And John's Control had, if I remember correctly, a 60x appreciation of their investment in India when they took the equity. So they had a 60 times growth on the equity investment that they made. Apart from, of course, exposure to the market or learnings from a developing market and many other qualitative gains that both companies have. So it's a significant win-win. And when we parted ways in absolute sense of same spirit of partnership that we had.
So it's almost like match made in heaven. It's almost lasted 2 decades. It's quite unusual journey of that much.
I was very closely involved in from 98 to initial few years of getting the technology into India, creating the first manufacturing capacity. So while it looks like providential that both these companies had a common vision, it also meant the building up on that relationship was not about corporate entities; it's about people. So I have wonderful relationships that formed over the period at the board level, on the executive level, at the technology teams. That relationship was nurtured on multiple fronts over the period.
So what kind of like a cultural differences or working patterns, okay, what you noticed to integrate the two companies together for 2 decades is quite interesting to know.
Yeah.
Right.
So they're good personal anecdotes, Srinivas, but let me take a step back and say, as I said, I joined Amara Raja because I thought I'm going to work out of my native place. But the activity and work content and the organizational environment made the working in a native place less and less relevant because we were driven more by the mission mode of what we were doing.
Yes.
But I had the opportunity to get back to Tirupati when Amara Raja John's Control joined hands because I was moved back to Tirupati as a project manager for the technology transfer from John's Controls. Now think of the decision making by the founders and the chairman at that point of time. Here is a guy who has worked in Amara Raja by then for about 6 years, but most part of it is in the marketing and sales. And now you rely on him or have trust in him to come back and play a pivotal role in managing technology. So the capability mapping, the skill mapping to put people in critical roles had a huge amount of risk appetite from the management. Would I take a call like that now? That we manage a $2 billion business, we're getting into lithium. Would I pick somebody to do a critical role of technology transfer with no experience in technology transfer? Mind you, when I was given that role, I have not seen even a still cross-sectional insight of a battery. What goes into a battery? We were selling batteries, we were understanding technology, but I never was involved in the technology development till that point of time. So now I recollect that the decision for the chairman and the Jay at that point of time to pick somebody like me to play the role itself was a very, very entrepreneurial thinking. And So what happened? January 1998 is when I moved back from Mumbai to Tirupati, and I was told this is your role. I had no seniors to look up to for guidance in the technology function because the general manager technology at that point of time has actually resigned. And I had a 4-day overlap with him when I moved back. He was leaving the company 4 days from the time I reported back. So there was nothing much in terms of somebody trying, guiding or providing the leadership guidance on that. I was directly reporting to chairman at that position. So 3 weeks after I reported in Tirupati, our chairman has called me and said that we are planning a trip to US. This trip is coming up a week from now. So do you have your passport so that we can apply for visa? So I had to tell him that no, I don't have a passport. Uh, so he got a bit upset with that. But then he understood that, there has to be a reason for somebody to apply for a passport in India unless you plan to travel. So he said, look, the visit schedule is confirmed. So the visit happens a week from now. If you can figure out a way of getting a passport and then a visa to travel to US, you can also be part of the visit. Otherwise, you have to wait. This was in the first week of February. And so I had to do a bit of scouting around to see what's the best way to get a passport issued at a short notice and then apply for US visa and get the visa issued so that I can travel.
You're talking about under
Those,
2 weeks.
yeah, under 2 weeks.
Okay. Interesting.
So I inquired, again, this Bumblebee approach. If you know the process, you will say it won't work. Because I was ignorant of the process, I thought I'll make it work. And there is this Tatkal scheme in passport issual. Right now, passport issual is a very standard process with a third party involved in the process of application and all of that. But then regional passport office is the one that actually makes it happen. And so on a Sunday evening, I left home telling my parents and my wife that, look, I'm going to Hyderabad. I'll have to apply for passport. If I get the passport, then I'll go to Chennai to US consulate to apply for my visa. And if I get a visa, then I'll travel from there itself to US. If my passport is not issued, I'll come back. If visa is not issued, I'll come back. And so those days, somebody from middle class traveling abroad is a big event. People plan for it, and then they make sure you're seen off at the airport and all of that stuff. But here I'm traveling to Hyderabad on a Sunday evening, saying that either I'll go to US or I'll come back if any of these things doesn't happen. Monday morning, I go to the passport office in Hyderabad, submit my application. By then, I figured out that the regional passport officer needed some kind of a recommendatory word on why it's an urgent visit. So we figured out somebody in the government administration who can call him up and request him to explain the application process. So we did that, and the police verification required for the passport issual. There's a mechanism whereby you take a temporary letter from a district superintendent of police, subjected to post verification. So this temporary police letter will act as an endorsement of, yes, we will take responsibility for his credentials, but you can process the passport on the call scheme or the fast track scheme. So Monday morning, when I apply for passport, Tuesday 2 o'clock, I get the passport issue, valid only for 6 months. Otherwise, you get it valid for 5 years or so. But since it's a fast track mechanism, the passport is valid only for 6 months. Tuesday evening, I reach Chennai. Next day, early morning at 7 o'clock, I go to the US consulate in Chennai. Thankfully, those days there was no advance appointments required, advance fingerprinting to be done, a third party processing your application, all of that. It's like first come, first serve. So you got to be early in the queue outside the consulate to be able to gain entry into it. A limited number of applications processed on a given day. So as long as you go there early and take a token, then you are in the queue. So you then stand in the queue and submit your application with an invitation letter from your the host in US and all of that. They pass through the visa interview and they decide across the counter whether your visa is granted or rejected. My visa is granted, and they asks you to come back in the evening to collect your passport with a visa stamp. So this is on Wednesday evening, 4 o'clock. I collect my new passport with the US visa stamp. Then I take a flight at 6 o'clock in the evening to Delhi for a connecting flight to US via Heathrow. London. So 72
So,
hours from the time I left home on Sunday evening with absolutely no clue how everything will work, I was actually on a flight to US.
so on Sunday evening, even you don't have the passport, by a Wednesday evening, you are with the passport and US stamp on it, and then you are planning to go to the States.
That's how it happened to me. This is my first international travel. There was a United Airlines flight, maybe code-share flight, Delhi to Heathrow and Heathrow to Chicago. And, I land in Heathrow, transiting to another flight to Chicago. There is another interesting experience there. My brother-in-law moved to London few weeks before that. So since there is a transit time, and there were no mobile phones those days, neither I had a mobile phone nor my brother-in-law had a mobile phone back in the UK. But I knew his office number, and I was transiting one day. So went to this public calling booth in the airport, and then made a call to him that I'm passing through Heathrow, and maybe on my way back I'll stop over if I can at Heathrow to see if we can meet. Then I was waiting for my boarding of connecting flight. I hear this public announcement at the airport. Somewhere I felt some familiarity with the announcement. Then when I paid attention to it a little more, it was calling out my name as Samudrala. Nobody calls me Samudrala in India. It's the first name, Vijay. Family name is not not how you are addressed. I said, somebody seemed to be looking out for me. Then I paid attention to the announcement. It said, please report at the information desk. So when I went to the information desk, there is this, British lady, and she looked at me and said, "Son, where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to U.S. Chicago. Can I see your boarding pass or passport?"
Yeah.
Then I look around to find my boarding pass and passport. I don't find it. Then she presents my boarding pass and passport to me and says, "Is this yours?"
So you lost your passport and the boarding pass.
At the phone calling booth, I seem to have actually left it there and didn't pick up. So I kind of placed it there, forgot to pick it up. Somebody else noticed it and then deposited it at the information desk. And, passport, boarding pass, and those days usage of the credit card, international credit card is very limited. So I had a lot of currency. All of that in a pouch.
Which is waiting for you on the British phone booth.
Yeah. So, first international travel, maybe a bit of nervousness, enamored by the complexity of Heathrow Airport, which is one of the busiest international airport. So I profusely thanked her. So she kind of advised me, saying that please watch out. These are very important documents in your travel. Make sure you always protect them. And then I land in Chicago, and then there's a connecting flight to Milwaukee. Milwaukee is the headquarters. And by the time my other team members, including Chairman and Jay, have already traveled to US because, as I told you, the visit was always on. They've already reached there 2 days before me. I was struggling through this passport kind of thing.
Yeah.
So they were there already 2-3 days before me. This was on actually Thursday evening in US. I took off from Wednesday midnight from Delhi, and hence I landed by afternoon on Thursday. There was a 3 or 4 hours break to catch a flight to Milwaukee. Chicago, Milwaukee is a very short, just 30-minute flight. When I landed in Milwaukee, those days 9/11 hasn't yet happened, so the security restrictions were very, very limited. And your host, who would be picking you from the airport, can actually come all the way to the exit gate of the aircraft. As you come out of the aircraft, your host can come up to that. Today, you can't enter into the airport premises to receive visitors, but there is this, there is a gentleman by name Wes Gifford who was my host. I was told he will pick me up from the airport. So he was actually waiting just outside the, exit gate. And I was the only Indian walking out of the airport. So for him, it's not a big deal to identify. So he grabbed my hand and said, let's move quick because there is a dinner that's been planned. Do you have any checked in baggage? I said, yeah, international travel. I have checked in baggage because I'm on a 3-week visit here. So let's go and grab the baggage from the luggage carousel. Went there. He helped me pick up the luggage and we got into the car. He dropped me at the hotel and told me that you have 15 minutes to get freshened up because the dinner is already on and the senior people from gas controls and the Amara Raja. By then, I was actually on the road for 96 hours after leaving home on a Sunday evening from Tirupati, right? So went to the dinner place. It was, on top downtown in Milwaukee. There's a restaurant at some higher floor in one of the buildings there. There were already 4 people from gas controls and maybe another 5 people from outside the dinner table. I was dazed completely. All the travel and no sleep. I sat next to my other colleague. I was introduced. I still remember the names of the people who were part of the dinner from gas controls. So I looked out of the window and found, it's February, it's the winter and it gets dark early enough. And the dinner in US is at 5 o'clock, not like 8 o'clock. So it is already dark outside and I could see few high-rise buildings around. Few minutes later, when I looked out of the window, those buildings disappeared. I couldn't see any buildings. So I talked to my said, what's happening? I saw some buildings earlier, but no, I don't see. That's when he whispered in my ears. Downtown Milwaukee, where there's a kind of a revolving restaurant on the roof. So the buildings I saw were in a particular direction, and a little later, because of the revolving restaurant, the buildings disappeared. We also talked about cultural integration between these two companies. One based in US with by then very mature business, significantly large size, whereas the other one which is relatively young, getting into a new business and all of that. I think, as I said earlier, while there is definitely a common vision for both organizations in terms of growing the automotive business in India, it's the people who made it work. There were a couple of people from John's Control side who were on Amara Raja board, and there was a management committee that was one level below the board that used to be the facilitating body for all the critical strategic issues, business reviews, and everything. And I was part of the management committee with many other colleagues from marketing and finance, other functional streams. Management committee also had our chairman and the G. So most of the issues used to get discussed, debated, deliberated, and an alignment was achieved before it goes as a board agenda. And if there is guidance required from the board, we really had that clearly identified and presented with the contextual reference, what guidance we needed from both. And John's Controls at that time didn't had an experience of technology transfer to a JV partner located elsewhere in the globe. So they didn't have an institutionalized technology transfer. It's both a blessing and a curse because people down the line don't know exactly what is the process to follow. It meant that there was freedom to explore. And for us also, there is no institutionalized technology transfer methodology that we had in the organization. So we were looking at what exactly we need and talk to the right people on what is required on that. So it was more like you go around and figure out what you want, then figure out who are the right people to talk about it, and ensure that those right people are given the kind of clearance or approval from the people who are on the board from Johnson side. And then you figure out what's the best way to absorb the information or the technology. And I remember when we first designed the Amara battery, 6 months after my first visit to US. I went in February 1998, then returned back to US in July 98 to really sit in their technology center designing the early stage concepts and detailing about the Amara battery. I think now looking back, we were unconstrained on many things. We didn't have a manufacturing facility that had boundary conditions of what you can make, what you can't make. We didn't had a supply chain that was constraining what we can use, what we can't use. So we literally had a white paper in front of us to build a new battery. John's Control by then is very strong on the BCI, the US standard. They also had some kind of engagement with Varta in Europe. All automotive components in India were largely complying with the Japanese industrial standard, or JIS as we call it, JS. So we needed a product portfolio that complies with the Japanese industrial standard, whereas the knowledge base available within John's Control is more towards either BCA group sizes, which is an American standard, or a DIN, which is a European standard. So it meant that we had to now marry the best practices that work in the SAE, BCA group sizes, the American standard, and the Indian European standard, but look at the functionality and the dimension with the JAS. So, the product development ideas, translating them into a product design and specifications and all of that, in a way, I think gave us the flexibility to integrate all of them. Had we worked with the Japanese partner, we would have imbibed exactly what happens within the Japanese world. So we had this American, European, and Japanese framework that we had to integrate. So if you look at Amaron today, I would say it has the American innovation, the Japanese quality, and the European styling. That's the way at least we perceived it those days, saying that are we getting the best of all these best practices, this one, that. And I know my colleagues in Jazz Controls were very excited with the finished product, and they were saying that we couldn't have done something like this in America because we already have these sandbox or boundary conditions defined based on our manufacturing automation capability. Any new part or a new component that you introduce would create so much complexity to replicate it in multiple plants, and the standardization that's required and all of that. Since we were doing it on a white paper, we were doing it on a greenfield site for the first time in India. I think we enjoyed the luxury of having the freedom to innovate what we wanted.
Thank you for explaining the Johnson Controls journey. Okay, it's quite interesting to know how these two different organizations integrated to build this 2 decades long partnership. Now, I would like to slightly move away from the partnership sector to the batteries itself. So, as we have seen in the last few years, okay, batteries are moved from the hidden component inside a car or anything else to a technology enabler at the moment. So, based on your experience, what has changed first? Is it technology or demand or geopolitics are actually forcing this transition to happen?
In the marketplace, the fundamental functionality of a battery, typically in the civil society, as I call it, has always been an emergency power backup when it comes to stationary applications and starting, lighting, and ignition when it comes to automotive applications. And lead acid batteries used to meet the requirements traditionally to a significant extent. While there have been some niche technologies that are used in special cases, like nickel cadmium is used in oil and gas industry, or for military applications where sometimes missile launching requires one-time use kind of batteries. They used to be silver zinc batteries. But the workhorse of battery industry or a workhorse of a battery product portfolio has been lead acid for a long, long period. And as I said, it is more like an emergency power backup when it comes to stationary application, or a DC power for communication and control and instrumentation in large industrial applications. It's a DC power source. When it comes to automotive, it is just starting, lighting, and ignition. When I joined Amara Raja, even after my BTech and MTech and working in Unilever for about 3 years, research, all of that, battery is a very generic word. The only familiarity as a common citizen or a common user is the ubiquitous torchlights that we had at home, where you use a primary battery or sometimes rechargeable secondary batteries. That's the only exposure a common man in the society will have. Whereas a battery in a telecom exchange, a battery under a railway coach, or a battery in a UPS home, or a battery in a telecom application would be more industrial in its scope. Very few people know. An automotive battery is, by very definition, you will recognize its presence when it fails, not when it works. It announces its presence by failure, not there is no experience of functionality that you will feel. It's like a medicine. Only when you are sick you use the drug. Otherwise, you don't worry about the pharmaceutical products. Right? We call it as a distress purchase decision. A battery
Mhm.
purchase is always under distress, like you buy medicines, right?
Yeah.
That's a world of batteries, maybe 3 decades ago. And in the Indian context, battery industry has been working for 3-4 decades before that. They were making batteries which are traditional in technology, but the self-sufficiency of battery supply based on domestic manufacturing has always been limited.
Yeah.
I don't think we were 100% self-reliant or self-sufficient 3-4 decades ago. So, from a technology perspective, the demand for new chemistries, advanced battery technologies was more driven by the user requirements. For example, the digital devices that consumers started using, whether it's a laptop or a digital camera or a mobile phone, required batteries that are mobile, lightweight, and can be integrated into a handheld device.
Mhm.
Obviously, lead acid could not have met that requirement, nor in a big way, nickel cadmium or other chemistries that have been matured. Doesn't mean that there were other technologies that were not existing. They were there in the laboratory, they were there at the innovation table, they were tried, proven in certain, developmental context, and perhaps used in exclusive applications. For example, lithium was invented much before it became popular and large scale in the marketplace. Right. So, advanced chemistries became more market oriented manufacturing happened when the user demand happened. So it's a demand driven, popularization of technology, not because, a technology was existing and hence it was pushed into the market. Unless there is a justification of a user functionality wise, the technology has remained in the lab. But I think the significant change happened on two counts. One is e-mobility market getting traction. The other one is the renewable energy becoming a significant component of the overall electricity energy basket, from fossil fuel energy to hydro to something else. The solar, wind, as the component of renewable energy became bigger and bigger in the grid, it became imperative that you needed larger energy storage solutions, and hence a new market on the stationary side and a new market on the mobility side became more important, which has actually dictated what technology we work. So last 2 decades, if you were to look at it, this is where I believe the battery came from under the hood, under the staircase, in a secluded room to center stage, both literally and figuratively, because that's when people started talking about it. It became a strategic capability, a strategic solution for the overall energy requirements, whether it's mobility or storage. And that's when I see, at least in the last 10 years that I've been actively involved in these conversations, I've seen it's not just academics who are talking about these exotic technologies. It's not just investors or entrepreneurs who are bringing that to the market. Investment funds started talking about it.
Yeah.
Media started talking about it. Politicians started talking about it. And you know that the politicians talk about any concept, it has really become very popular and very important. That means that even the political class is paying attention to battery as an idea, battery as a product, battery as an industry. That I think is the evolution of battery. As I said, being hidden, coming out onto the center stage.
That's quite nice to know that. Actually, I mean, that's true. I think in recent times, I don't know any other technology that's been talked so widely, across the spectrum of the people. So based on your 30 plus long years, if you want to pick either two or three non-negotiables for winning the batteries as an industrial business, so what are they? If you really want to win an industrial business from a huge customer, for example.
I would probably look at two things here. One is, as I said, the user functionality has evolved into multiple contexts, and hence the battery is required to perform certain things beyond what probably we have been seeing it doing 2-3 decades. So I always thought, how do you explain to a 10-year-old kid what is a good battery? It's easy to converse with people who are in this field, who are technically aware and who are otherwise engaged with this industry. But if I walk into a school and then want to explain to a 10-year kid what is a good battery meaning, I figured out the simplest way to explain is that a battery is a good battery. Should be it is one that weighs lighter, charges faster, lasts longer, costs cheaper, and is safer in operation. So lightweight, long life, fast charging,
Yeah.
affordable cost. Cheaper is not a right word to use. I would rather say affordable cost and safer. Of course, the sixth dimension that comes to is it fits into the circular economy framework, that it is sustainable from a supply chain perspective, and you are able to recover and reuse as much as possible whatever material that you can use, and the end of life management is fitting into the circular economy framework. Now, this to me, I didn't want to make it more complex, but if I talk to a 10-year-old kid and tell him, this is probably 5 words that I use. But then when you try to delay this, what makes a battery work longer, what makes a battery get charged faster, the C rates that we talk about, the thermodynamics involved in fast charging rates, and then the high cycle life, energy density that we talk about, safety operation, then you get into a lot of complex piece of technical aspects. Now, your question is, what are three non-compromising attributes or aspects of building a battery industry, battery business? I think first thing I would say is that the technology innovation has to be non-compromising. I don't think we have reached a stage of a plateau on technology development, and that's imperative that innovation need to continue. The second one would be about, I would say, more of manufacturing excellence or manufacturing precision. We are almost getting into a pharmaceutical industry equivalence here, or a semiconductor manufacturing equivalence. We talk about clean rooms. We talk about precision manufacturing with absolute control on tolerances, and you
Automation. Yeah.
got to make mistakes. And so digitally integrated manufacturing process flow, automation that's required. Whole lot of complexities coming together. That's why setting up a successful gigafactory poses a lot more industrialization challenges rather than product design challenges. So that's the second factor, it's in manufacturing excellence. The third is about sustainable supply chain. So you're talking about product technology innovation, you're talking about manufacturing excellence, and the sustainable supply chain. These are three very strong imperatives. Any organization that has significant strategic growth ambitions cannot compromise or afford to compromise on these three aspects. The reason I'm saying this is simple, that, okay, now I can have access to technology developed elsewhere and then industrialize it for the markets that we operate in, and perhaps even build a resilient supply chain. But if I don't have the technology innovation participation, 5 years down the line, maybe it'll become less relevant, if not obsolete. You've got to track the innovation curve on whether you're going to get into, anodeless technology, graphite-free anodes, or semi-solid electrolytes, whatnot. You got to be looking at definitely keeping track of that. So you got to build that capability to participate in the technology development and innovations. Similarly, manufacturing excellence is definitely understood better, and the resilient and sustainable supply chains. Now, the reason supply chain becomes important is not so much about business capability, technology capability, skill levels of the industry, but it's about your ability to navigate the geopolitics.
I really liked that you really onto the point. Because for me, I think also I always say that battery is not a commodity business. Okay, it's a technology business. You know, so you have to innovate. Otherwise, you are out of the race very soon. Actually, given the growth stage you are in now, actually, I'm very surprised if it is not completely obsolete within 2 to 3 years itself. The trend is like that at the moment.
Yeah.
So based on the similar context, so what is the people usually over-invest, but that is not actually translating into products or competitiveness in your view, particularly from the Indian perspective?
I think at this point of time, considering the market opportunity, there seemed to be an emphasis on creating manufacturing capacity as a priority, and say that okay, we'll solve the other problems later. There is a market opportunity. There is a window of time available for you to localize the product. So let's go and outsource the capabilities, outsource everything else, but build a gigafactory. Sometimes it may not be a bad idea if you know that your outsourcing will work for you. But I personally feel that you can't, uh, deprioritize the other aspects of building technological capability. And when I talk about technology capability, I'm talking about both product technology and process.
Mhm.
And you can't deprioritize building a resilient supply chain. Because supply chain has two aspects in this context. One is security of supply, the other one is competitiveness. So if I have to make a choice between these two things and say, do I go for a secure supply chain, even if it is relatively more expensive, I will know whether I'll win the market. But then if I say I want to look for more of, competitiveness of supply chain and a bit of risk on the security of supply, then I might end up, falling short of secure supplies for the capacity that I've built. So that's I don't think I have a real good answer saying that if you have to choose between security and competitiveness, which would you go for? I feel a little nervous to prefer one over the other. But if you generally look at setting up a plan, getting the machinery installed, invest behind that is something that probably, large corporate houses with, significant resources can execute it. But ensuring that you are able to bridge the technology capability gap and supply chain capability gap is equally important to see that you are able to go beyond the initial phase of commissioning.
That's very good one, actually. You really bang on to the technology, manufacturing, supply chain. All these three should go hand in hand if you want to build a reasonable, successful battery business. So you mentioned that about the gigafactory, right? So what is a gigafactory, like from the battery business perspective? Now, so what does one very good gigafactory looks like in your view?
I think all battery professionals need to thank Elon Musk for coining the Gigafactory word. I don't know if that was existing before that, but when he was building this 35 gigawatt hour plant in Nevada, he did say, no, let's call it as a Gigafactory. So in a way, it's not that Gigafactories were non-existent prior to that, not only for lithium, even for lead acid. In fact, we run a 20 gigawatt hour capacity on the lead acid. So if now looking back, if I have to retrospectively coin the word of gigafactory, it applies even for lead acid batteries. But thanks to Elon, he has branded it so well that only lithium cells manufacturing or advanced cell chemistry cell manufacturing are considered as gigafactories. And here again, sometime in 2015, 16, when we were trying to familiarize ourselves, I was speaking to a few, business leaders in US and in China, Japan. Those days, distinctly remember a conversation where a 3 gigawatt hour capacity is seen as the right scale to get the scale effectiveness.
3.
3 gigawatt hour. I'm talking about 2016, right?
Okay.
And Tesla, I think, has not yet built their first 5 gigawatt hour capacity at the time. So when we were talking about it, yeah, if you can get a 3 gigawatt hour, I think you would have got that scale to get started. Now that number, as you know, over the period has kept on going up and up and up. And post COVID, when there is a lot of euphoria in Europe and US about gigafactory build outs, the numbers were more like anybody who is announcing less than 40 gigawatt.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe not under one roof, but at least in one location. That you got to have a 40 gigawatt hour capacity. That's how it was kind of scaled up. Now, visibility to what's happening in China was less known those days, but post-COVID, I think there was a lot more travel to China and we are able to get a little more exposure on what's happening in China. But a gigafactory typically represents the right sizing of a scale of operation, perhaps largely determined by the coating lines, where you get how much coating line capacity do you get and how many coating lines you need to have to justify the fixed infrastructure of clean room, of utilities, of your NMP recovery scale, whatever. So I think that's what defines the size of a gigafactory as optimal. Now, when you look at supply chain capability, obviously, the bigger you are, the better procurement efficiencies that you can get, better bargaining power that you get. But it's not, linked to a particular gigafactory. It's about the overall business scale that you operate from a sourcing control perspective or a supply chain. So I think, again, I go back to saying that it helped to have a common lingo, a common understanding, and common perception of the challenges, the complexity, and the scale the moment you refer to a gigafactory. So we have to be thankful to Elon for coining and branding that word very, very powerfully.
One cannot finish the discussion about batteries and its value chain without touching upon the big brother, I would call it, the China, right? So based on your kind of critical long experience, why did China industrialize batteries so effectively, for last almost 2 decades compared to any other economy in the world?
I think this question can have a longer conversation because every time you visit China, you learn something new. And I've been to China multiple times over the last few years post COVID. In fact, I visited gigafactories in China as well as in Korea even before COVID. That was my first exposure to a gigafactory, but that time it was more like a less involved visitor to understand what's happening, and hence we didn't really get into the dry room or getting to closer to the machines that are operating these gigafactories. If one were to understand the evolution of lithium manufacturing scale and capability in China, I think we need to follow what happened to CATL story and what happened to BYD. These are two leading lights of how that scale happened. While today there are multiple others, but the story of CATL evolution and story of BYD probably provides very good insights in how China has been able to master the art of battery manufacturing in the new age. And what I see is that they have actually understood the value chain very well to be able to control what's happening in the upstream as well as the downstream. On the downstream side, the power electronics capability. On the upstream side, the mineral processing and the specialty chemical processing capability to prepare precursors and battery grade cathode and anode active materials. Then the separator manufacturing. Many of these things they have really focused. I believe a lot of it was accomplished with a very clear, focused, strategic mandate from the government. Apart from financial assistance and all things, like IRA scheme has talked about in US, But to translate the financial assistance into the kind of manufacturing scale that China has achieved is based on a very clear understanding of the entire value chain and then bringing in the requisite capabilities across financial resources, across capital equipment manufacturing capability, across processing capability, and talent pool that need to be built. And the other thing also in this case we got to look at is the ecosystem. A corporate like Amara Raja need to set up a gigafactory. Perhaps it would be a lot easy to do that as a new entrant in a Chinese ecosystem than outside China, because the kind of support systems available, the response times that you get, talent pool available is obviously one of the factors. Many things are very enabling there, and that's where I see that this capability actually percolated from tier one cell makers like BYDs or CATLs or Goshen or Eve or others to tier two to tier three, and I also know tier four people who can run a single digit gigawatt factory as competitively, if not at the same excellence, and still find their own marketplace even as a tier four cell maker. So, a tier four cell maker's capability in China is something that's still not matched by perhaps the largest universities in India yet. You're still not there in terms of the comfort, the capability, the knowledge base that these people have. Not because they have to do everything on their own. There is an ecosystem that they can lean on. There is an ecosystem that they can, draw from and build these facilities pretty well. I think it's going to be quite a journey for India to even get anywhere closer to that kind of a capability, because you got to figure out creating that ecosystem. Whether it is academics, whether it is material makers, whether it is product designers, and you know, it's like we've been working on a couple of cell models for quite some time. But for us to be able to produce them at a volume that I would be able to replicate these designs at a commercial pilot level, I'm not even talking about mass scale production, but at a commercial pilot, that I can give them to my customers and package them and then put them into a vehicle or in an energy storage facility with that concept that we developed. We don't have that infrastructure in India, and we are right now in the process of building it as an in-house capability, a commercial pilot plant or a R&D prototype plant with multi-chemistry capability and multi-form factor capability. And if I have a cell design and material recipe ready, and I need 10,000 pieces of that to go to the next level of validation, we don't have that capability in India anywhere. So I have to go to either Korea or China to get something like that done. And it's not easy to outsource that sitting in India. People have done it, but it's not that easy, both from a cost perspective, time perspective, and flexibility perspective. But if I have to do that sitting in China, and there are multiple shop floors available where you can make those 10,000 cells, maybe slightly more costlier than a mass manufacturing, but the response time, the ease of getting it done, get enough samples for you to validate it, field level, validate it, environmental stress testing, and then so you are able to produce something that can be taken onto the gigafactory shop floor and not necessarily just on your R&D lab to directly gigafactory. That bridge is missing in India today. That bridge probably is what helps China to percolate it down so that a lot more people can try validating this. While the tier one cell makers are pushing the envelope, going up and up on the innovation chain, the baseline capability in China is also going up, even if you go down to tier two, tier three, tier four.
And I think based on my kind of experience with China, because I've been involved with China for last almost more than 5-6 years now, closely, they are on a different planet altogether. So what we have seen actually in Europe particularly, we try to copy paste them, okay, but some cases we utterly failed. So from the Indian lens point of view, right, what are the things Indian gigafactories absolutely avoid copying China at this stage in their trajectory?
I think learning from what has happened in China and the expertise that they've built is a necessary and mandated requirement. I think if any gigafactory in India is trying to do, saying that I will do it anything but China approach or non-China kind of expertise as thing, it's a very tortuous path. Not that I say it's impossible, but you will end up taking longer time, probably an expensive way of doing it, and then market relevant product that you need to make. All of that is a challenge. And commercially also, many customers in India today source their cells from China. So they're going to benchmark you both on functionality and to some extent even on the commercials, say that how close are you and how much more premium and how much more, quote unquote compromise I need to make to depend on a local cell. But if the question is more about what you don't want to do,
Yeah.
because you're not going to be successful doing that, it works in China, not in India. I think, as I said, it's about the calibrated manner in which you want to ramp up your capacities. If I talk to any Chinese player and you give them a business case for a 10 gigawatt to be established, they've done it all multiple times, so it's very easy for them to do another 10 gigawatt of factory, even if it is a greenfield site. I'm not just talking about brownfield. There's a blueprint available. There are resources, people, the partners, supply chain partners, equipment suppliers, all available for them to be able to do that. If I have a particular product part number where everything else is, given that you can get to a 20 gigawatt hour kind of a demand, and then can you go ahead and set up a 20 gigawatt hour line at one go? I would say that would probably be quite challenging to be able to do that because you're not yet done your basics. So to be able to get your mixing consistency, and the recipe is known, developed and matured. I'm not worried about the recipe part. I'm worried about ability to operate the mixer and get the the slurry out coming from the mixer consistent for being able to be coated at the kind of thickness and characteristics that you want. You got to be able to prove that you are able to do that consistently. And again, here goes into your process controls, your equipment controls, your material controls, and the ability to replicate it day in, day out. Similarly, the coating and calendaring. Can you get it right? Can you ensure that it is meeting all your process requirements and the specifications without being able to establish that and internalize that capability? If you try to do multiple lines at the same time to scale up at a very high speed, I think it would be a risk. So I would say plan a calibrated capacity scale up. I know it might mean little extra time. It might mean you're not getting there. You're not the first to probably roll out the product, or you're not getting scaled up the way you desire to or aspire to. But I want to make sure that the basics are internalized and imbibed in a manner that you perfect it before you go to the next stage. This is where I believe some product development efforts also done by startups have faltered because early success is seen as a proof of capability, and then replication of that became a challenge.
Okay, I just want to ask you one question related to the startups, as you mentioned that. Okay, so if you look at the both on the cell manufacturing side as well as the OEM side, okay, what I have seen in the battery industry is the startups are more successful compared to traditional players like LG's, Samsungs of the world. So why do you think this is the trend in battery industry?
I see two, comparisons here. One is what gave Tesla the success that other automotive OEMs could not achieve. I think one is, of course, Tesla is a very different kind of corporate. We see that in their SpaceX programs. We see that. I don't know if Elon Musk is the common factor. Obviously, for the external world, he's the common factor. But there is some kind of a physics-based ground-up engineering and technology development that's done. But more importantly, when it comes to Tesla, I think they were not looking at electric mobility or an EV vehicle as an alternate to ICE in their own system. So they were never looking at, I'm extending my product range to EV from what I have right now. They created the market, and hence they were laser focused and passionate about building an EV vehicle. Not that there are other people who have not tried and failed. There are very many others who have tried and failed, but the Tesla's DNA of developing and proving technology at scale really worked in their favor. That's one analysis. Do we have similar examples like Tesla, where they enjoyed EV success outside China? I can't think of immediate answers to that. Nissan worked with the Leaf much before Tesla did. And Nissan had the Leaf as a vehicle, but Nissan also had an ICE business to manage, and hence probably Leaf was never a passionate, single laser focus. But when it comes to cell making, I think it's a very important observation that how come people like LG and Samsung haven't been able to scale up and innovate as much as CATLs and BYDs of the world did? This is where I think the secret recipe of China comes in. That has multiple elements to that. One is, of course, as I said, the strategic push that the Chinese government had. I consider that a strategic push because, again, at least from an outside perspective, I think China has recognized that to attain certain level of dominance and superiority in the automotive space, they will never be able to achieve that with the ICE platforms. The Germans, Japanese, and the Americans have long dominated that, and to be able to come up as a very strong not alternative, but a very strong player in the automotive world, using ICE as a technology platform, it will be difficult. They'll always be second. Now we have seen Hyundai becoming strong and Kia becoming strong, but they were always not at the same perceptionally. Well, the actual numbers may vary, but perceptionally, technology space wise, Germans have been always leading, and then of course you had Japanese having their own dominance. So strategically, Chinese government has probably looked at e-mobility and hence EVs as a way of gaining that dominance in the automotive space. And battery being a very important ingredient of an electric vehicle, they have really, really backed up, companies like CATL and PV. But also, while the government support strategically, financially is a strong enabler, it's also about the rest of the ecosystem that got evolved in the Chinese. For example, if you listen to Robert Jung about the story of how he has been able to build a CATL, they also had a pivot at some
Yeah.
point of time getting into LFP.
Yes.
Whereas BYD always looked at LFP as a way of doing it. From a ATL, which was making lithium cells for handheld gadgets, and when the CATL was carved out of it and they started focusing on a bigger systems, the breakthrough that they got with BMW platform is what actually built a significant amount of confidence in them. And that was like a door opening for them for possibilities. There again, getting a German OEM endorse you as a EV battery supplier brought significant credibility to CATL and belief in them that now we need to expand. I visited way back in 2017. I was surprised about the scale at which they were already setting up their infrastructure, even these days. The environmental tested facilities infrastructure they had itself was like a playground. It's such a massive test facility that they had for environmental chambers, everything else. Then the academic fraternity and the academic institutional integration with industry also is probably a significant enabler for technology innovation, which Germany had it through Fraunhofer for quite some time. Japan probably has its own model of academic industry integration, but probably China took it to a very next level on multiple technology domains, e-battery being one of that. Probably the speed at which they were working, the scale at which they were working, the number of resources they put behind in terms of PhDs and other things. Probably they beat on that number game. People like Fraunhofer or the academic institutions in Japan and US. Today, I still believe there's a lot of innovation sitting in laboratories in Japan, US, and Europe. But industrializing that is where the challenge is coming in. Whereas China could very judiciously integrate the innovation in the lab to the industrialization of that at scale.
Agree in the concept that they can create the product, they can quickly validate the product, and they can scale it up as well, right? So whereas in western part of the what I have seen is that they have beautiful technology, but it's very difficult to validate it quickly right? And manufacturing itself has a lot of downsides, be it energy or regulations, whatnot, right? That's a lot of red flags in that regard. So as you are on the similarly on the startups and founders and stuff. So for example, if you're advising any battery startup, so what sorts of proofs you will demand in their claims of scale ups or whatever technologies and so on?
First question that will come to mind when a startup is investing resources, what's the objective? Is it technology development or is it also about industrialization? I have seen that if the objective is technology development, the opportunity to monetize that technology need to be properly understood. There are limited opportunities to have significantly scaled up monetization. That means you build IP and you want to monetize IP, both in terms of the time window you have to monetize that and the scale at which you can monetize that becomes relatively limited. Maybe 10 years ago, the opportunity was bigger because not many corporates have had their in-house R&D capability, and hence they were looking at outsourcing the IP knowledge on that. But as more and more large corporates have capability building done in-house, that they are able to build their own IP or at least start adapting the knowledge available. An independent research-based startup trying to monetize their IP would have limited opportunity, and hence what you put into the business also have to be calibrated accordingly. So if you have a unicorn ambition as a startup, and you want to monetize that just based on IP monetization, but I know there are some startups that say that I build an IP on material. Now I don't want to sell IP. I want to sell material based on this IP. So I actually get my revenue based on material selling rather than just the IP selling. It may work as long as your innovation cycle is continuing on that. I've seen electrolyte or some of the unique material recipes that gives an advantage being monetized. But if your idea is to industrialize in large scale, I think startups need to have a roadmap created for getting the financial resources. I've seen many startups floundering along the way where cash burn is exceeding their ability to raise funds. That's where the momentum gets lost. That's where innovation CEO suddenly is struggling to manage the operational capability and the financial management. So the technology innovation attention gets diluted because you're dealing with these other challenges. I've seen that with startups of different nature, where suddenly your valuation gain helps you get that equity funding in the initial cycle, but it's not enough for you to sustain getting into industrialized investments in the Gigafactory landscape. And hence, you are now trying to solve financial problems, fund flow problems, investor attention, rather than the innovation that you started off with. That's where the game gets lost.
Yes.
So if you are on an industrialization mode, be very sure about your cash flow and access to funding. We've seen even billions of dollars being funded getting exhausted after a point of time. So it's a game of deep pockets, and unless you have a legacy business that's funding you or a large access to financial capital that can continue to help you fund, startups will struggle. I mean, there are multiple cases. I don't want to name any one of them in this
Yeah, of course.
conversation, but
Yes, no.
there have been good examples of where the struggle has.
I kind of see a lot in first-hand experience. A lot of people talking about the only capex, but they're always ignoring or forgetting about the opex. That's a completely
Absolutely.
different beast to how to deal with. And other point you rightly pointed out here that it's more about the operational challenges one has to look into, particularly given the fact that a lot of VC funding is flowing into the value chain where it is not a traditionally patient capital. So
So there have
one thing
been
I would
examples of digital technology based consumer focused companies that have burnt a lot of cash building the customer base, acquiring market, and hoping that they will be able to start with a positive or make margins after the scale up has happened. We know examples of that where significant amount of market acquisition cost and technology development cost is incurred. but they try to monetize the customer base that they build on that much later, and cross-selling and all of that is enabled. But that's not a product manufacturing platform. These are more like market platforms created. There's a
Yeah,
food delivery app or a e-commerce company or things like that. But here we are talking about the real world of brick and mortar.
exactly. There's a huge difference between like those kind of businesses versus the traditional hardcore, some sort of non-sexy businesses as well.
Yeah.
So just on the one last point on the startup side, what are the kind of few red flags you'll see in any pitch deck related to battery startups nowadays?
I think one of the things that I would be clearly looking at is the feasibility of the technology, because I've seen it again and again that the early success, which is not rigorously validated, excites people saying that I am here to solve the problems of the world with this solution. But when you actually start scaling it up to on the TRL cycle, as we get down to TRL 6, TRL 7 kind of a thing, you see that there are limitations of the robustness of the technologies. I've seen this interestingly not just with the product, but also some recycling ideas people come up. That they
Mhm.
have cracked the issue of energy consumption and recycling, that they crack the issue of yield and all of that. Like that's probably okay when you have a very controlled, limited pilots that are done. But when you get to the real world where you are getting scrap from multiple sources and then you are processing it, whether you are targeted yields and targeted operating metrics will be able to see. The tolerance for failure is very limited on the recycling side on
Mhm.
these numbers. So I would be very carefully looking at the proof of concept and the validation of the idea. That's one thing. Of course, the second thing is about the talent mapping. If a startup is heavily dependent on few bright minds and that they want to now have significant investments made just based on that before institutionalizing the skill and knowledge, because this is a market where talent is in scarcity. And it doesn't take a long to have some of these bright minds deciding to move on. If they find that things are not happening at the pace, they have less patience with that. They can move on, and then suddenly you find that you actually relied on individual brilliance rather than institutionalized knowledge. These are the two things that I really look for. Of course, the founder's commitment, the founder's grounded approach. Maybe that's the cultural aspect that over the 3 decades plus that I have imbibed having worked in Amara Raja. Some people think that, there is this classical principle. They say startups should learn to fail fast so that they learn and then go to the next iteration, which means that you are making decisions faster than you can absorb so that you are able to fail. I know it works under a specific set of contexts, but fail fast should not be the only mantra. That you keep trying multiple things and keep failing. It's also about how well you are learning from the failures and ensure that you are not having repetitive failures.
For example, if I'm a 20 years old graduate, okay, based on your experience, would you recommend to enter somebody into this industry? If so, why?
I would definitely encourage people to pursue this field because the opportunities are significant, and you want to build knowledge, have practical experience, spend time in the industry, and go through that learning curve, put your knowledge to practice, and gain practical experience. I'm reminded of what Bill Gates seemed to have said in one of the conference, which I actually saw that slide in a Bloomberg event, where he said, well, there seemed to be a threat on the relevance of various skills and various professions, considering AI revolution happening and all of that stuff. He felt there are three professions that are secure. One is the AI experts themselves, because that's where a lot of things will be getting done. So if you're an expert in AI, you be assured that your profession is not under threat. Of course, you need to keep upgrading your knowledge
Yeah.
and that capability, but the field as such will have space for AI experts. The second one he says is biologists. And he says, that's because humans are very selfish and they are not going to outsource biology to AI anytime soon. It's about your body, it's about your health and all of that. So you may use AI as a complementary support, but you're not going to have doctors replaced by anything. And a lot of biological research that happens at solving disease problems and solving health-related problems. Biologists will be in demand. The third category of professions he talks about is energy professions. And I think I agree with him because there is a strong convergence that seems to be happening in the lifestyles of the society and the role digital technologies are playing in it, and those digital technologies dependence on energy, right? So humanoids, which is the front end devices that will be automating many things, back to data centers, AI data centers. Each one of them needs energy. The human body can consume food and create energy, but these things really need energy. There's no other way that you can make them. So energy professionals will have a significant role to play. And the convergence of AI, nanotechnology, and energy innovation that's happening is going to be really very important. So if you're a 20-year-old young person and wanted to explore a career option in the energy space, I think this is a fantastic time to move in there. But then if the 20-year-old person is having entrepreneurial bug and wanted to have a startup approach, I would probably caution them to say that be very sure what you wanted to really go off. Bright idea is important, but not sufficient. Bright idea is necessary, but not sufficient to succeed. Because you're 20-year-old and you're excited about everything, but the world out there is a very different demon altogether. So, brief answer to that is I would encourage. In fact, I'm seeing that, Srinivas, we just go through the LinkedIn profile. 5 years ago to now, there's an explosive availability of talent, young talent in the energy storage space. Of course, it's a different matter as to when you really include them who is really standing out as really capable versus others using a lot of these keywords as expertise in the. But definitely, there's a lot more number of people who are moving in because I think this is one technology where there is a convergence and confluence of multidisciplinary. So there are people with AI knowledge coming in, there's people with electrochemical chemistry knowledge coming in, there are people with material science knowledge coming in, there are people with the process control knowledge coming in. So there is a convergence happening of multiple disciplinary professionals to make it work. It's very difficult to get a bright person from a university to join battery industry 15 years ago.
2 points actually from that. One about the career transition or planning itself, but I would like to focus a bit more on the AI, as you mentioned. What is the role of AI is going to play either on the innovation or scale up or industrialization of batteries?
I thought a couple of years ago that AI is complementary to what scientists otherwise are doing or engineers otherwise are doing. But it's rapidly changing, and now I see that AI is actually really fundamental to be able to succeed. So, if you look at the entire value chain of battery industry, AI seems to be playing a role across the value chain, all the way starting from your material screening to the monitoring of the battery system in the field to remote data access and the diagnostics of the health of the battery and the function. And I have firsthand witnessed that you can sense suboptimal life or performance of the battery much earlier before it actually gets into if you are able to track the battery performance. In my mind, two major hurdles in this industry. One is a capital intensity. A capital industry has two dimensions. In a typical engineering goods industry, what I have seen in the Indian context, if you put $1 as your capital capex, you have a potential to generate somewhere around $2.5 as your revenue if you are having a integrated manufacturing value chain. I'm not talking about last mile assembly like mobile phones come in India today, but I'm talking about an integrated manufacturing value chain. You put $1 as your capex, you get about $2.5 as your revenue on that finished product. But now you look at the current lithium cell gigafactory. Best of the estimates outside China, I'm not talking about inside China, but outside China, for a greenfield gigafactory project, we probably need about $40 million per gigawatt. And with the cell price hovering around, if it is an electric product, hovering around $45, $50 per kilowatt hour, you are talking about, you put $40 million as capex, you might get $45, $50 million So you're talking now what 1 to 1.2 as your revenue to capital. That is one capex intensity. The other capex intensity that I'm saying is this facility that you created for a gigawatt hour is so rigid, so inflexible that you can only handle that chemistry and that form factor to produce.
Yeah.
If you want to change chemistry and form factor, you have an option to do it one during its life cycle. You can't do that every week. I can reconfigure it for probably a different form factor or a different chemistry, but I can do that only as a one-time change with some incremental capex going into that again. So, the challenge of capital intensity is one problem that this industry needs to deal with. The other one is about long gestation periods for development, starting from material recipe, then screening multiple materials, then building the prototypes, then validating them, predicting their behavior for short-term electrical performance, life cycle performance, safety performance, all of that. You really have to do this over a larger period of time. Even on industrialization, your plant performance, equipment optimization, feedback loop control on the process control side, AI can play a very enabling role across this value chain to speed up things and automate things. A traditional automation may not work. An MES kind of thing that is picking up thousands of parameters on the plant operations, then simulating an optimal process condition, providing real-time feedback to that. Or one mathematics that I've seen somewhere, not even only the extent of creating a digital twin, but at least integrate AI capability to optimize your performance. So yield can go up by 3%. From let's say you are at 85, you can push it up to 88, or you're at 90, you can push it up to 93. And then scrap can come down, and machine downtime come down. Cumulatively, if you are operating at X EBITDA before deploying AI, you probably can add another 3-4% to the EBITDA percentage if you really have a robust AI system just on the plant operations. I'm not even talking about the product development cycles being crunched using AI models. But one caveat here is that you really need robust database to be built up for the AI to practically work in a smart. If you are trying to adopt AI without robust database that you would have to create over a period of time, the AI is going to probably mislead you or probably come out with very fancy outcome, which we have tried. Actually, we don't have a lot of test data on the product with multiple this thing. Then you are trying to use AI to start with. It becomes a bit of a challenge. But I think the data is getting built, populated. Probably it can be outsourced if you have worked with the right agency, or a corporate that's maturing over a period of time can start building their own data. So the database becomes extremely important.
I mean, I agree with the concept. I think that the battery valuation / manufacturing itself is becoming a data game now. Actually, the even autonomous vehicles, like the more data you can accumulate, or actually in the top of it you're talking about. The similar context in the current scenario where AI is being oversold, for example, or which thing will make you instantly skeptical about AI is going to deliver in battery value chain?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if I have enough experience to say whether it's being oversold. Gigafactories that have been in the initial phase of their operations, somebody comes with the AI solution about failure mode diagnostics. Because what happens at the current level of quality control, you know that a good cell coming out of the line is known only in the formation. Would I be able to really screen my electrode to a manner that I will identify its deficiencies and hence know that I am not going to get A-grade cells using that electrode towards the end of it? That calibration accuracy is relatively limited. I will see gross mistakes with the electrode, but fine tuning that to the level of A-grade and B-grade cells coming out of the formation is a little bit difficult, because even SEA layer formation control that you have based on electrode quality and your assembly integrity and precision and all of. So somebody comes and say, look, if you have a bad batch on the formation area, I can go back and pinpoint what exactly is the failure mode in the upstream processes. If there is not enough data built over a period of time, I would be a little skeptical. It may be probably simplifying the problem or oversimplifying the problem to narrow down to a failure mode in the process time. It could have happened based on how electrolyte filling has happened. It could have happened how you control the CA layer formation. It could have happened based on your, winder, compaction. Multiple things can come. If you have enough database to be able to create that empirical correlation, and then AI is, the learning cycle of an AI, you taught the AI model to really pinpoint this, it will go. But if somebody tries to do that right upfront, based on external data, I would be a little skeptical.
One last point regarding AI topic we're discussing now. There is a lot of phobia in the market. AI is going to take over a lot of our jobs, which also includes some of them in battery industry. Are you really worried about that statement, which is oversold anyway in the markets now?
Not at this stage in the Indian market for gigafactories. I would rather build as many people as I can with skills and capabilities before I start optimizing the headcount, because straight away relying on AI is like a black box approach. And as I said originally, if you're saying that let me build manufacturing capacity and then outsource everything, I think my concern with that is about the sustainability and the robustness of the business operations with that approach. I would rather learn how things are happening with the set of people who are capable of doing that, and then start outsourcing it either to an external partner. Now I know how it is done, so I don't have to waste my time doing it, or outsource it to AI because I know how it actually happens. I probably can now lean on AI to do it faster, smarter, and more precisely than humans can do. But I think my perception, I could be wrong, but I wanted to build a capability in the organization, a capable team in the organization who are robust enough in their knowledge to be able to navigate through multiple layers of changes that are likely to.
So one thing I would like to ask you actually just came to my mind now that you are in the frontline business of batteries, interacting with a lot of customers and customer qualifications and so on. From the battery business perspective, what are the challenges a cell manufacturer is facing right now to qualify, to an OEM particularly or energy storage supplier? So one thing which often comes into my mind is the qualification timelines. Is really bottleneck for any cell manufacturer. So you want to add anything more to that from the hands-on experience from the frontline perspective?
So, Srinivas, at this point of time, customer decision making on adopting a cell is based on um, their own validation process. There's no, surrogate data for them to rely on. Short, short circuit the testing process, which they on ICE vehicles we have seen that. I'm already supplying to customer A. I have a lot of surrogate data within the framework of confidentiality and non-disclosure agreements. We can use the common knowledge to another customer.
Yeah.
It's going to be quite some time before we get to that level of general understanding and common, visibility to qualification criteria. But the other challenge on this side is also that customers who are building I'm talking more about electric vehicles, customers who are building their vehicle platforms here are looking at the choice of cells that they have from, say, China market, which is like a supermarket stores. You walk in and then you have a choice to choose what you want. And because the cell maker is not making exclusively for you, or they're making for a larger market with a much bigger scale, you want to have a suboptimal volume to be also for them, it's still available. But when you want to look at the domestic cell sourcing, that luxury of having the spread of product portfolio is not possible because cell makers like us cannot replicate the portfolio that's available in the Chinese market. So we will be more selective about what cells we would make to cater to the market here. And there is a filter called scale. If you don't have the scale, you will not make. That scale can only happen when you start consolidating the product portfolio, saying that, okay, I have this luxury to go and pick and choose what I want from the Chinese market, but I want to locally source it. I may want to consolidate that and see that I'm standardizing the product. When you are standardizing, you need to know revalidate, right? So you have validated a different type of part number. Now you're trying to consolidate and standardize. How do I know that this product can do the same job, or if not a better job? That validation process is where we're going to have initial challenges. So I'm just, substituting a like-to-like product that's being sourced today from overseas market. Then there is enough knowledge available. They just need to validate me as a supplier, validate my plan, and probably that, as I said, there is probably ways of crunching that. But if I'm trying to offer a different part number for an application which has been using a little bit of variety there, that becomes a little more challenging. One way we are trying to circumvent that is by having this commercial pilot list. Before I take it onto the Gigafactory shop floor, I have a more flexible, agile commercial pilot facility that can produce these samples at scale, at commercial scale, replicating the manufacturing processes, replicating the material that are used there, and give large number of samples to the customer for validation, both in the field and in the lab, and any other verification that need to be done. So I don't need to wait for a giga line to be established to kickstart the product validation. I'm able to do that in early stage from a commercial pilot. Now, this is something that the automotive industry is used to, where you make a B sample and then offer it. But in the gigafactory ecosystem, a B sample manufacturing capability is literally non-existent in India today. As I said, I would love to have probably a common infrastructure established by government or public-private partnership, which I see it's available elsewhere in places like China, Korea, maybe even somewhere in Europe. I know Front Offer has established large facilities for prototyping in multiple locations. In India, that's not there. So we are building our own B sample commercial pilot line. So I'm able to now get onto the validation process early on. But as we keep doing it over a period of time, maybe there's a lot of surrogate data that we build, that the validation cycles can be crunched based on surrogate data, and only doing that specific customized testing validation that we done. In this time, I have to probably recollect and appreciate what Mahindra has done in India, because they are one of those people who have built a EV ground up. Of course, along with Tata, that has been doing some time now. But the SUV that Mahindra has introduced in the market, they went for a very ground up approach. They've used the blade cell, they've used the packaging, pack manufacturing in house, which means they build the pack design in house, they build the pack manufacturing facility in house, and they have drawn the expertise of multiple partners in doing this. And the validation process that went through this is probably much more rigorous than what a adopted platform from global manufacturers is. Because they only do homologation validation. The fundamental engineering validation would have been done already right? The other electric vehicles that are being introduced in India, but Mahindra has done everything ground up. But I have realized that any strategic roadmap that you have built, the core need to remain the same, but the execution methodology need to navigate through changing scenarios. So 2 years ago, if you asked me what would be the split between a EV versus ESS market demand, there would have been a heavily loaded towards EV, saying that ESS doesn't seem to still have a viability because it's policy driven, government driven. It's more infrastructure build out, the consumer facing demand and all of that. But now we see that there is a significant traction happening on the BESS, while there are some headwinds on aggressive adoption of e-mobility. So if you had a product portfolio roadmap, if you had a manufacturing blueprint and all of that, are you agile enough to adapt to the changing scenario? Today we talk about, earlier we used to refer 2030 as a marker year, saying that what would be the demand forecast, what's the kind of market dynamics by then. But now 2030 is too close for the timelines that we have. So we started looking at 2035, a 10-year framework to be able to do this. I believe that next 4 years would be very crucial in the Indian context to be able to build a domestic battery value chain. The scale of demand could go up to 100 gigawatt hour plus, but the manufacturing localization may lag behind that, more from the perspective of the range of products that are required to meet that 100 gigawatt hour, whether the capacity will happen faster in ESS than in e-mobility. So those dynamics need to be looked at. Even if you are able to get 70-75% of the demand met by local cell manufacturing. That would have been a substantial achievement. I think that would mean that we are getting to that preliminary threshold of capability in the industry. I'm speaking more from industry perspective, not purely only Amara Raja perspective. But then it doesn't mean you have achieved commercial success by then, because I do not believe that 2030 would deliver a commercial successful gigafactories. We need to go to the next orbit of operational excellence and scale. So 2035 will probably more important to understand how much more it will scale up, and hence how each of these gigafactories are able to achieve the excellence, commercial success part of it. That as I see moving forward, we got to look at that next 4 years as one phase, and then the rest of the 5 years as a later phase of consolidation and commercial success.
But it also depends upon the, as you mentioned, consolidation, right? Because I don't think, personally, I don't see that there is a space for this many number of gigafactories which have been announced. Right? There should be some sort of consolidation, like what happened everywhere, in every other industry as well. But one thing regarding it's always a comparison, right? Is India is going to step up, So it's always a comparison between Asian giants like China and India. So not from the Amara Raja perspective, from your own experience, is it the right comparison to do between those two larger economies of the world?
Definitely, if you directly compare with China and try to benchmark India, it's going to be quite some time before we get there, because it's a very different framework that we are talking about. But in Asia, outside China, who do you compare with? That you become a strong second force from this part of the world. That's where I think India has an opportunity. I mean, Korea has been there, LG and Samsung have been there, so I'm not discounting that. But future growth perspective as geographical capacity doesn't mean who owns the business. I'm saying so as a manufacturing footprint and the value chain, India has the right opportunity to scale up after China. And we may be a distant second for quite some time to come, but the cost structure, the manufacturing cost structure, and the talent capability, the ability to absorb investment, there are very very enabling and facilitative factors that are there. We all know what the risks are, but sometimes while narrating the risks, we tend to overlook the advantages that are also there. So in my mind, there have been good examples of manufacturing industry in this country that has really scaled up. Automotive component ecosystem is a very good example of how we have scaled up over the last 20 to 30 years. So that's an opportunity. And now electronics manufacturing is also taking significant bets on the building capability here. Are you getting to the value chain where crux of that will be localized? It may not, but there is a roadmap that you can get there. I'd be very happy if the entire battery value chain is localized up to 40% also in the next few years. It doesn't have to be 80%. 40% is great.
So if you have given a power, what are the things you would like to bring from the Indian context to boost or supercharge the electrification, both maybe on the OEM side, but also on the cell manufacturing side?
I think demand creation is something that a lot of effort has gone into that. The government policies are enabling demand creation. There's auto PLI that's subsidizing partly the vehicle manufacturer's cost. Charging networks are subsidized. Some kind of incentives are there for consumers to opt for that. Not all categories of consumers, but a large part of vehicle consumers do get certain support from the government. From a cell manufacturing side, I think I have three specific things. Investment into Gigafactory has a significant risk capital before the project becomes viable. So typically, if you look at the P&L of any new project and look at how it's progressing over a period of time as the capacity scale up happens, you will see that before the P&L hits positive cash flow and an affordable margin, there's a gestation period that takes longer. So the government policy support system has to look at mitigating the risk capital element. It can run in three ways. One is, of course, I keep saying that there is a innovation premium or localization premium that need to be supported from customers also. So if somebody says I'm buying so and so cell from my overseas supplier, and I have a landed cost of so much, I want, as a local cell maker, you need to match with that landed cost. It's impossible. We know that.
Yeah.
So now how do you bridge the gap? There are three components to bridge the gap. One is the localization premium that the customers may have to be ready to pay from a security perspective. Why are you looking at local cell maker at all? Not for cost competitiveness, but more from supply security.
Supply chain perspective.
Right. The second element is about the government incentive policy, where some of this risk capital is mitigated to the government funding. It could be in the form of upfront support on the capital investment. It could be in the form of manufacturing performance incentive, which is what all PLA is about, performance production linked incentive. Or it could be also in the form of tariff barriers for a period of non-tariff barriers are also there, but from a monetization perspective, tariff barriers are something that should be. So the delta between the landed cost of imported cell versus locally made cell for a period of time, looking at the cash flow challenges that any investor have, need to be supported. That's one part. More like a policy related aspect. The other one where I would say is I think we need to create a platform, again, enabled transparently by government anchoring on the technology innovation. There is this 100,000 crore the Anusandhan National Research Fund, ANRF, that's been announced by the government, spread across 7 critical technology areas identified. And there is a way of dispersing the fund. I have a feeling that we need to see how a significant portion of that can go into creating energy storage. Because anybody significantly investing into the cell making in India has to focus on technology capability building as well. So does each of the manufacturers build their own in-house capability and hence make those significant investments that do not provide any dollar revenue to them directly attributable to that investment? It's a investment you are making for capability building, hoping that will lead to managing a gigafactory operation. But it takes time before this investment actually can be incorporated into your costing sheet. Which is where I am saying why everybody has to build their own capability. At least the common capabilities can be built through this funding. Then you give certain funding to individual corporates based on the innovation that they are working on, and create that. I would say, a snowballing effect there. That each one of them is complementing the efforts that are going on rather than fragmented approach. That they dovetail and support the scaling of it. That's a second element. Of course, the third element, I do not have a very good solution, but I know the problem statement is build a resilient and secure supply chain. From a OE perspective, the supply chain probably leads to cell sourcing, but a cell maker perspective, the supply chain is about battery materials. As much as we are trying to solve the problem of cell localization from a vehicle or renewable energy developer perspective, from a gigafactory investor perspective, how do you ensure that there is a competitive and secure supply chain established? If a significant portion of that is domestic enabled, that will be great. What's the roadmap for that? I mean, there are multiple ideas being talked about. Financial support is not the only roadmap to that. We'll have to see how that part will be evolved.
That's where the China is mastered, right? Because almost 2 decades ago, they mapped out completely going back to the mine and to the recycling. You take anything of the value chain, they got their influence and their control over that. That's one of the, I think, the best strategies ever executed, I think, in terms of creating an entire
Which
new
is why I
ecosystem.
say the reason China succeeded is not just because of the government financial acceptance. It's a very, very strong strategic play that enable the participants to get these strategic advantages.
So one question I want to ask you before we close the technical part of it, you mentioned about the regulations, right? Like incentives, regulations, tariffs, and so on. So which kind of regulations are the matter the most for the Indian gigafactories to ramp up? Okay. Is it regulations that are going to help, or is it just a paperwork for them to talk?
I mean, the enabling regulations in terms of policy subsidy we already talked about, but I'm more looking at the governance and technical regulations part of it. I think product safety is something that should be definitely very, very clear so that you're creating a common bar for players. So if you define safety norms, safety standards very clearly, there's no leeway given to people to cut corners to get competitive advantage or commercial advantage. That's something that should be regulated. I mean, it's difficult to expect industry bodies or industry players to voluntarily adopt that unless there is a strong regulation. It means very high precision engineering, reliability in the components, manufacturing control. Players like us would like rules of the game framed to ensure this is not diluted. The second part of it is about the circular economy. We got to look at how do we ensure that the recycling framework is enabled and regulatory framework mandates compliance, but don't make it a very rule-based policy because you got to also see what are the pragmatic aspects related to this and ensure that compliance is honest and robust. I'm saying because the learnings from many other recycling policy frameworks, that is metal recycling, plastic recycling, e-waste recycling, even lead acid batteries, the rules are more violated than complied with. So those who get away with deviation from the rules have an unfair advantage at the cost of environmental, at the cost of value chain. But we can't afford that on at least advanced cell chemistry that we are talking about. Particularly, I think somebody said every gram of lithium coming into the country should be protected for its multiple recycling loops. That's a value part of it. But of course, even the environmental elements have to be looked at. How do we ensure that circular economy is meeting both objectives, the environmental sustainability as well as the value chain?
I would like to just explore your personal journey so far. Okay. So I've seen that you changed almost like 10 different roles in last 30 years at the same organization. Okay. What kept you there? And is it possible for this generation of the students who are entering into the market to implement that kind of thing in their careers?
Yeah, you're right. People say that there is a lot of professional enrichment when you change jobs. And I have not missed out on that because while I have not changed organization, I've definitely changed jobs. I think I had some 11 plus roles during the last. On average, each role I played for about 3 or 4 years, and then there is a new role. And also, when I look back, except for one role where I succeeded somebody, every other role didn't exist before. So it's a new role created in the organization, and I had the opportunity to define the contours of the role, the deliverables, the and framework for that role, and standardize the role definition. It's a unique opportunity. Perhaps one of the reasons that kept me going is about the excitement of discovering new roles. Not that there were no hard times in the journey here. Not that there were no both the organizational level failures or individual failures. It could be naive on my part to not recognize them. But each of those hard times are actually also associated with doing something for the first time. So, the difficulty is probably overcome by the excitement of doing so. I still remember when we had our lithium research lab established way back in 2017-18. We just took up the new role of CEO for the listed company. It's the first time a CEO role was established from a professional management talent for the listed company. Prior to that, Jay was MD and CEO for the business. Uh, I had to go to the board for getting a capex approval for setting up a lithium research facility. This was almost 8 years ago. So, the conversations we had, the deliberations we had, getting that approval, which is a significant amount at the time, without any visibility to the business, without any visibility to revenue. So for a organization like us, that's a very significant decision. And hence, after that, you setting up the lab, making people appreciate and understand what goes into lithium technology, soil their hands, build, those crude prototypes to start with and then refine them over a period of time. That was exciting, but at the same time, it was challenging to get that right. And not that we haven't failed. We failed multiple times before we got it right. So if you ask me the question, say that what kept you going for 3 decades plus, I think that excitement of what I call, and there is a nice phrase to that, the ethic of knowing the unknown. That's been part of the organization. And I had multiple opportunities to be involved in that process of knowing the unknown. That probably is the best.
Given that most of, I think, at least for last decade also, you are onto leadership level at a reputable organization now. So in your own words, how do you define a leadership?
There are two elements to that. By the very definition, you're talking about leadership, meaning that you're leading something. And one of the biggest resources that you're leading is people. So to me, leadership is how do you enable people to give their best. You're part of the team and you are given a particular role to lead. This is not so much in terms of authority, it's in terms of getting the best out of your team. Because every single individual, definitely within Amara Raja, when they wake up in the morning, they are excited to go and do a great job at home. I don't think there is any element of doubt about it. They're extremely excited and committed to do a great job. The leadership role is to enable the environment and provide the kind of coherent direction. This again, direction doesn't mean from an authoritative perspective of decision making alone, but provide a coherent direction for the team to be able to understand the common vision, the purpose, and relate to saying that I'm doing this because this is how it's helping the larger purpose and vision of the organization. That's one part of leadership. The other part of leadership, definitely, that I've learned over the last few years is about managing uncertainty. Uncertainty is given. I think it's becoming more and more apparent that you can't have control on all the environment around you. So how are you going to, decide or take decisions around uncertainty? I think to me that's more of an art than a structured science. I don't think at this point of time I can say I have been able to do a very great job of that part of it. But to me, I think more and more important thing is to your ability to make decisions under uncertainty. Actually, there's a very classical example somebody gave. When we do these strategy sessions, write down what you control and write down what you don't control. And these lists that you have prepared are relevant to the managing the business. So if your strategy is able to move what you don't control into what you control, push them from this bucket to this bucket, you have a great strategy. The question is, at the end of it, you will be left with certain elements that you cannot move from what you don't control to what you control. And that's where the leadership capability is to see that how am I going to navigate myself around these factors that I don't really control.
So you have to focus on the more things which you cannot control.
Yeah. And two other words that have come up post-COVID definitely on managing these things that you don't really control are about agility and resilience. Resilience is where you face some tough situation and you still be able to be grounded and navigate through that tough situation. Agility is where there are opportunities and how quickly you actually navigate, change course, and still move forward.
So if I'm asking you that, what is the one leadership trait you inherited from someone else, and you're still using that?
I think Amara Raja has a very strong leadership framework. We have 14 leader behavior traits and 11 attributes. And every year, our performance appraisal is equally weighted on these behaviors as against the business targets that we have. Suppose somebody is performing excellently on the business targets, but falling short on assessment on the behavioral targets, this takes over. Whichever is lower is taken as the reflection. So One of the exercises that we do is self-assessment, and that gives me an opportunity to benchmark myself against my peers on each of these learning behaviors. So I think from an inspiration perspective, I would say that driving accountability is one behavioral trait because on the face of it, looks like driving up accountability to the team that reports to you. And it's actually easy because you have an authority to drive accountability. But how are we going to drive accountability amongst your peers who don't report to you? And more importantly, how are you going to drive accountability to your superiors to whom you report? Right? In which case, sometimes you may need the kind of attention and the support and decision making in a given context. For example, when you engage with the board or when you engage with the promoters, when you engage with the other seniors in the organization, you need their input, you need their support, you need their timely involvement and direction. How do you drive that? And also on the business side, the softer side, there is an Amara Raja culture. How are you ensuring that you are able to drive the accountability on everybody to, genuinely and honestly practice the Amara Raja culture? So, having the power or force to enforce, which means you need to be seen as somebody who is able to influence, have the credibility to communicate, have the sometimes be the role model to drive that accountability. And I typically tell my team saying that Indian work culture wise at 7:30 in the evening when I'm just about winding up my work, suddenly somebody calls me saying that I need this information. Can you share it? I say, yeah, no, tomorrow I'll share. But they know, sorry, I need it now. Are you able to respond and spend that extra 15 minutes to share the information to them? Question is, in many cases, a lot depends on who asks, right?
Yeah.
Because you feel obliged or you feel accountable saying that, oh, this person would not have asked me at this time unless it's really important and relevant. So let me spend that extra time. Then the question is, would you be able to get the same response when you need it? With how many people can you get that response? I think to me, that driving accountability is not so much from enforcement, but accountability in the form of self-realization, self-motivation, saying that I'm accountable for this, so I better do it. Not because there is a rule that says.
So what is the difference between a manager and a leader, and how one can transition from the manager to leader?
I think manager is somebody who manages a given set of resources to achieve the outcome that you set. So it's about process efficiency. It's about the competency. It's about prioritization. To me, a leader goes beyond that into a lot of other qualitative and subjective issues in terms of, are you able to inspire your team to the common vision? Are you able to stand in the front row when there is adversity? And this is not about managing, this is about being there to deal with the difficult situations. Uh, like I tell whenever my team comes to me, I tell them, I'm here to help you, but don't come and just report problems. When you come to me, narrate the problem and provide me alternatives of possible solutions and tell me what stopped you from picking up the right solution from these alternatives. If you have difficulty to choose the right solution from these alternatives, then I believe that you are reaching out to me because you believe I will have probably a broader perspective, a different understanding, or maybe a delegation of authority for me to take that call, which from a DOA perspective you may not have. But I want you to recommend what solution is working for you. If I agree with you, then there will be less and less interactions required on that because you will also gain confidence for a period of time that, oh, now I am in sync with my reporting boss. But more conflict is there that you chase option one is the solution, and I keep all the time saying option two is the solution. Then we got to figure out where is this delta coming in. Can we make sure that that is bridged? That means that either I sync with you or you sync with me. Over a period of time, we start thinking from a common platform. To me, I think that's probably is the difference between a manager and a leader.
So if that's okay, can we enter into the quick rapid fire to just know who is Vijayanand beyond his professional work.
Sure, Srinivas.
Are you ready?
Yep.
So, are you a coffee person or tea person?
I'm a coffee person. I feel coffee sets the right mood.
Early bird or night owl?
I think I'm an early bird. I think with age catching up with me, probably I wake up early enough.
So, any favorite books?
Oh, Ayn Rand has been a very uh, favorite writer for me, and the Atlas Shrugged, We the People. I read them at a very young age. It kind of opened up my mind. At that time, with whatever rebel that you have in your mind, these books really resonated very well with me. But I read a lot of Telugu literature also, so that nice Telugu books that I really enjoy reading.
So, one quality you would take from somebody else, what it would be?
Um, I would refer to three people. It's not fair for me to limit that. Uh, there is this concept of ikigai zone that Japanese talks about,
Mhm.
where what you are good at, what is your passion, what is remuneratively recognized, and what is good for the society. All these four converge into the ikigai zone. I know at least two people who have realized their ikigai zone. One is my own father. He's a Sanskrit professor and a scholar, and he has done what he's good at and what is recognized, what is remunerative for him till he passed away at the age of 86 years, much longer than the retirement that he took at 60 years. So I think to me, he never thought that that's a professional work. It's a passion for him. The other person is our own founder, Chair. He is another role model. I probably had more face time with him than my father during this professional experience. Association with Amara Raja, but he is another person who found his Ikigai zone. That it is social good at his heart, accomplished through business success. So I can see him very comfortable to sit in a village center the previous evening, then travel overnight to Frankfurt to attend a board meeting in a more corporate setting and feel equally good. So he's able to navigate the two wide spectrums of context because fundamentally, I think he has preserved himself very, very, pristine and never got influenced by the context in which he is in. So to me, I think he figured out his guidance. And the third person that I need to refer to is my own senior colleague who unfortunately passed away a few years ago, Narain Reddy. But right now we have an award in his name called the Narain Reddy Gurucom Exemplar. Gurucom is our senior leadership platform. We
Mhm.
recognize each year one of our colleagues from the leadership team, Gurucom. On his name, there is an annual award institute. He's been an exemplary colleague, a very honest, genuine, true person. Every time I think of him, there is this subtlety in personality that's also very powerful. And the spiritual journey talks about being able to discover that subtlety in you, the subtleness in you, that gives you the strength and not make you react to things, but respond. The inner core, the inner person is very strong when you have that subtleness in your brain. I've seen him be such a strong person, whereas he's probably very soft from outside.
So, one best advice you ever received?
I think I've been told many times that you are suboptimal in your performance compared to your potential. So many times I've been told that you are not fully utilizing your potential. Try hard. That's been probably, a self-awareness advice that has been given.
So, dream travel destination.
I in my travel so far, I loved visiting Bali. It was actually on work, not so much as a vacation travel. But I really love the nature of this and also people. It's not about nature. Bali, as I said, I don't know what the rest of the Indonesia is, but Bali is a really very soothing place to visit, spend time, and engage with the communities around.
One question you will ask in all interviews.
I particularly young people, I ask them saying that what motivates you to build a career? Because like you have earlier said, not usual for 30 plus years to engage with an organization. But then I look at young people to see what's really the motivation for them to build a career. Is it motivated by a role model they have in their mind, motivated by the professional knowledge that they want to build, motivated by the organization that they want to? It gives me some insight into are they really grounded in their aspirations?
So one line you would tell your younger self.
That's a difficult thing. I have to go back. You have to discover what you are beyond your professional role. That's something that I missed. So if you ask me saying that describe Vijayanand in 10 sentences without referring to your professional role, I find it very difficult. If I'm going back 30 years ago, I will say that please protect your individual self beyond profession.
That's very, very useful. A failure which you learn from.
I think we miss few opportunities because of uncertainty in decision making. So do not look for completeness of inputs and data to be able to decide. Sometimes you have to go by an intuitive hunch. This happens with more maturity, I know for sure, but there is something that's called intuitive hunch. Don't rely on analysis as the only way to find a decision. So I have examples of failure where we could not make a decision because we thought information available is incomplete. But that also have meant the cost of lost opportunities.
So if you got miraculously 1 extra hour a day, what would you do with that?
I think I would meditate.
Okay.
So actually, it's a reflection of my inability to manage proper time to meditate even now. It's an excuse saying that I don't have time to meditate, but if the extra hour is there, maybe that is what I'll prioritize.
What is the role of the mentors in your life? Would you recommend to have one?
I think I do not have a formal mentor. There are a few people who I looked up as people who can guide me. But a role of a mentor is to show you the mirror and help you find answers for questions that you've been struggling with. Not provide answer, but help you find answers yourself for questions that you've been struggling with. And in the process, they actually show you the mirror to make you understand yourself, your own thoughts, your own confusion, your own strengths. The mentor should be able to provide you a mirror.
Last one career risk you glad you took, and other one, the career risk you haven't taken.
I'm glad I joined Amara Raja because many people thought at that point of time that it's just taking, leaving Hindustan Lever Limited and joining Amara Raja. So I'm glad I took that because the journey has been extremely enriching. Is there a career risk that I wish I had taken but did not take? I don't think I can recollect anything. In Amara Raja, it's not that something was offered to me that I denied. Saying, oh, I wish I had accepted. I don't think it's there. There were opportunities to move out of this industry. There were opportunities to move companies and all of that. Yeah, thanks a lot, Srinivas. I think it was really very engaging conversation. Helped me open up and think about many aspects that probably I would not have consciously been thinking otherwise. So it really helped me clarify some of my own ideas. And lovely to have me here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If you found this is interesting, subscribe to the SP show. Thanks for watching.